Marvel Comics made a Double Dragon comic in the early 1990s, and nobody remembers it, but somehow it perfectly captures everything weird, violent, and awesome about the 1990s. What's up, everyone? Today we're diving into a lesser-known but fascinating piece of comic and gaming history, Marvel Comics' Double Dragon. Yep, that Double Dragon. The iconic beat-em-up arcade franchise where with two buttons you could kick, punch, jump, and even jump kick to take on bad guys who looked like rejects from the Warriors movie. A little bit of background: in the early 1990s, Marvel was aggressively expanding beyond superheroes. They launched both Marvel Comics' Epic imprint and later Marvel UK, which focused on licensed properties, video games, movies, and pop culture crossovers. So Double Dragon was huge at the time. There was a successful arcade game, a home console game, an animated series, and eventually there was even a live-action movie. So from a business standpoint, it made a lot of sense to do a comic adaptation. The series itself followed Billy and Jimmy Lee. These were two twin martial artists trained in the fictional fighting style of Sosetsuken, and the story leaned hard into sort of the street-level crime, gang warfare, martial arts mythology, and the books themselves, they were a little bit darker, a little bit grittier in tone than the games. It differed from the games in a few other ways. While the games are basically simple, I walk to the right and I punch and kick everything, the comic tried to expand the lore, add a bit of emotional stakes, and give Billy and Jimmy more of a personality. The enemy was not the Black Gang like it was in the video games. Instead, it was a guy named Nightfall and his superpowered henchmen. There's also a little bit more of the mystical and historical side of things in the books. And basically, the brothers, instead of just being really good at fighting like they are in the video games, they have a sort of superpower. It also dove into the family dynamics in the book, and there's a lineage of what they call the Dragon Force, which is what gives them that superpower. The books themselves are a little bit silly, but passable by what was coming out at the time. The brothers, they basically bicker a lot while they fight alongside each other. It's a running gag. It gets a little bit of annoying. They're basically fighting over this hot chick named Marian. She's a cop who helps them out. And as mentioned earlier, the main enemy is a guy named Nightfall who seeks to control the city of Agalopolis. So what the brothers do is they protect this Dragon Force. And throughout this series, there's a lot of the two of you working together makes the Dragon Force more powerful type tropes. And it's basically this lesson of teamwork that has to be learned over and over. And again, that gets annoying. But basically, Nightfall wants to steal the Dragon Force, and that's exactly what he does. The weird thing in this book is the book tries to mix in like these elements of the game, not just the characters, but they'll say stuff like, hey, look, there's a ladder, we need to climb it. And then like bad guys will throw dynamite at them, just like they do in the games. The book's really written for like fourth graders, which makes sense because that's probably the audience that was reading this, because that's probably who was playing the video games at the time. Another thing is there's this sensei, this master, who basically, he's really only there to give like really tropey advice. Like he'll say stuff like, you must work together to double your power. You must never give in to despair. You can transcend what we had believed to be the limits. And if you are true to yourselves, victory will one day be yours. Spoiler alert, he dies. And then like after he dies, they find out that he was their grandfather. So they were just living and training with this guy and never knew that that was their grandfather. Fun fact, that's not the only time that happens in this book. And also a fun fact, in the first two issues, Marian gets kidnapped twice because that's her whole purpose. She like gets rescued and then the next day gets kidnapped again. And then randomly they run into this guy named Stan. And it turns out he's their father. So that happens. Well, anyhow, also at some point the Dragon Force suddenly turns into an actual dragon and they have to fight it. That is until they realize that if they work together and use teamwork, the dragon will turn back into the Dragon Force, and it does because they work together, and then it once again possesses them. So there's a Dragon House headquarters. It's just a regular house, but they call it the Dragon House. There's a dragon plane that shoots missiles, and there's also a book. You guessed it, the Book of the Dragon. In any case, at one point the brothers are tricked into fighting each other, which is a cool scene. And respect to Marvel, they actually made one of the brothers win. So it's Billy. Apparently Billy can kick Jimmy's ass whenever he wants to. Anyhow, the series wraps up with Stan, their dad, telling the brothers about the history of the Dragon Force and how their mother died giving birth to them. And as it turns out, Nightfall used magical forces to end the life of the mother while she was having the boys and giving birth to them. This is because Stan and Nightfall, they were basically both vying for the heart of their mom. Stan won, so Nightfall's like, hey, well, if you can't love me, I'm gonna end your life. And so at that very moment that he's telling that story, Nightfall's forces then attack them, and they basically decide to take the fight to Nightfall. And when they do, Nightfall's able to gain the upper hand until, well, their mom possesses Marian and encourages them to work together as a team to beat him. She then says goodbye, and then, like, there's hot girl Marian who's just very confused, doesn't know what's going on. And I assume the boys will continue to pursue Marian, but I do think it'll be awkward because, you know, you'll never know when their mom's just going to show up and possess her again. I mean, you could be like, I don't know, in the throes of a passionate lovemaking session, then all of a sudden, like, the mom takes her over and is like, hey, Billy, did you remember to wear rubber before banging this hussy? I can see how this could become uncomfortable. Well, that's it. That's the Double Dragon story. And as far as the creative team goes, there's several writers and artists. The writers included Dwayne McDuffie. He does the first 4 issues of the series. Tom Brevoort and then Mike Kantorich, they wrap up the ending of the book. There are a bunch of different pencilers: Sal Velluto, Brad Venkata, Tom Rainey, Kirk Jervinan, Stephen Butler. Basically, at the end of the day, this was sort of a second-tier creative team, kind of like a JV football team. The storyline's pretty basic. At some points, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and the artwork ranges from being solid to somewhat mediocre. Depending on who's doing the artwork, some of the action scenes are a bit flat, and some of the characters are drawn kind of stiff. And just like everything else in the early 90s, this comic had all the stuff you loved about the 90s, right? Heavy shadows, muscular, exaggerated anatomy, brutal hand-to-hand combat, urban decay, lawlessness, and then, like, my favorite trope of the 1990s is these gangs, which is completely made up of white guys who just go around and assault women for fun. Yeah, you know, because I think of inner city gangsters being white Caucasian guys with mohawks. Anyhow, overall the action's slightly more grounded than superhero comics, but it's still stylized just enough to feel larger than life. And despite the name recognition, the series itself was kind of short-lived, probably for a few reasons. One, licensed comics, they're kind of risky and expensive. There was a whole bunch of books coming out at the time, so the market was super saturated. Video game adaptations are kind of hit or miss, and Double Dragon's popularity had already peaked, so it was probably going downhill by the time these books came out. So I wouldn't say it was a failure by any means, but it definitely wasn't a breakout hit either. So whether you remember Double Dragon from the arcade, the NES games, the cartoon, or the movies, the comic adaptation is a fascinating artifact of its time. I really do wish there was more of an updated comic book take on this series, because I think Double Dragon is kind of cool. I think it has a huge potential to be a great series. If you do want to read these issues, they are somewhat rare, but when you do find them, they're pretty inexpensive. Like, for instance, I could only find 4 of the 6 original books in my collection, and they're pretty beat up, so I decided to go on eBay, and I found the entire set in decent condition for under $10. So at the end of the day, would I recommend reading this? Well, maybe not, but you know what? The Dragon Force may compel you to do so. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, please like, leave a comment, and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. And if you like comic books like I do, please keep an eye out for my upcoming comic. It's called RebelX. This is an awesome space adventure. I'm writing, drawing, coloring, inking. I'm even doing the lettering on this all by myself. This is a great book. I can't wait for you guys to see this. It's full of action and adventure. And thank you so much for watching. Bye.